Welcome to the Week 10 NFL Recap, brought to you by Brian's Deductions. Before we get into the content today, I'd like to ask that you like, subscribe, share with everybody you know, and comment on topics that you would like to see us talk about, whether it's sports related or not. Also would like to make an announcement now before we start that we will likely have a Week 11 NFL preview coming out Thursday morning, as long as I'm able to lock in and get that done. So just want to give you guys that heads up as well. And with that, we'll jump right into the content. So my first category this week was titled Hot Seat Watch, because there are obviously a good amount of coaches that are apparently around the league probably in a very precarious position, we'll say. So we'll start with the first game, which is the Colts and the Patriots. So this game was a very interesting game. I don't want to say wacky because it wasn't like a whole bunch of fluky things took place. It was just that it was very surprising how things went. New England did a great job on the ground running the football, which is what made some things a little head scratching, especially once they got in like the red zone. Obviously, the biggest difference in this game, I guess I would say, is obviously when the Colts got in the red zone, they converted on their 4th and goal opportunity, and Jonathan Taylor scored a touchdown. But for New England, when they got in the red zone, Mac Jones had a couple of questionable decisions, but definitely had a tough interception throw where Mike Gesicki was streaking towards the end zone, and Mac just flat out missed him. I remember earlier in the season that Rex Ryan, who's one of probably the greatest defensive minds of our time, coaching or not coaching currently, we talked about how he basically questioned Mac Jones' arm talent. And I think on a play like that, even with him throwing off his back foot, which I guess you can understand because the offensive line has been shaky this year, so I think he was a little jumpy in the pocket. But in a situation like that, I think you gotta be able to take one for the team and just step up, take whatever potential hit you might be taking, because that's a game-changing play if you're able to make that throw. Bailey Zappi being brought in for the last drive obviously showed you the level of desperation that I believe Bill Belichick is not only feeling but obviously coaching with, because he understands that if they don't turn this around soon, he will be asked to leave. I won't say given his walking papers, but I'm sure he will be asked to resign. I think he will still have his job after the bye week, but it's definitely going to be something worth monitoring, especially with the way Robert Kraft has been discussing things the last few weeks. So that's definitely something to watch out for. On the Colts side, obviously, huge win. One that you obviously feel like you needed to get because you are playing against a 2-win team. So being able to get that win, go 5-5, stay in the hunt for both the wild card and the AFC South is tremendous for them. And it's just about, honestly, just for this game, it's one of those where you're glad that you were able to get the win. It's just one of those things where you were glad that you were able to get the win, and you just kind of move on to next week. You don't throw out the film entirely, but this is one of those where you're glad that you got an ugly win over a pretty loss. So it's for lack of a better term. Now to the shootout of the week, we have the Lions and the Chargers. So before we start before we talk about both teams, I think the biggest surprising stat from this game was that neither side got a sack. So that just shows you how prolific both offenses were. Also, both teams were combined 7 of 8 on fourth down conversions. So we'll start with the Lions. They did a great job of running the football. Both David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs had pretty good games. Jared Goff did a very good job making plays early and often throughout the game, finding his guys, making things happen. Obviously, if he's able to play at a level like this, Detroit is definitely up there as one of the teams that could be. It's definitely up there with, say, San Francisco, Philly, and Dallas as the teams that could compete for a championship out of the NFC. Obviously, as a defense, we've seen the Lions play better against other teams, but I think that's something that you'll definitely be looking to improve on if you're Dan Campbell and Antoine Glenn, who's the defense coordinator, because you understand that, of course, like we just said, you're playing the San Franciscos, the Phillies, and the Dallases, who have pretty good to great defenses. So if you're not able to bring it defensively, then you're asking Jared Goff to basically do what he did yesterday, which is fine. It's not an issue as long as he plays like this. But I think we understand Detroit's formula is usually run the ball, generate most of their passes off of play action, and ask Jared Goff to make a few plays. Not quite a game manager, but a little bit above that, because Jared Goff has shown the capability to play pretty well. On the Chargers side, Justin Herbert had another good game. Obviously, his connection with Keenan Allen is practically almost second to none. The way they've been able to connect, but obviously this game is more about Brandon Staley, because for a guy that was touted as a defensive mind, I wouldn't say defensive genius, but as a defensive-minded coach, if your team is giving up 500-plus yards, not getting any sacks, not getting any turnovers, and allowing 41 points, it's very hard. And you're not winning games either and having questionable decisions. It's very difficult to justify still being able to be employed as a head coach. So it'll definitely be interesting to see over the next few weeks how the Chargers look, especially on the defensive side, because obviously if they continue to lose games, people were already calling for Brandon Staley's head after the Raiders situation a few years ago, and then of course the whole debacle against the Jaguars. So if his defense does not improve and they continue to lose games, it's probably going to be time for him to get his walking papers. So we know for sure that he is on hot seat watch. Our next game, we got the Commanders and the Seahawks. So this was a very interesting game to see, just because the score would probably make it seem like it was more of a shootout than it was. And while both teams played well offensively, this is more of a situation where there's a lot of bend but don't break defense for the most part, especially on Washington's side. I had a conversation with my coworker earlier in the week saying that I felt like if they were proficient in red zone defense and able to hold Seattle to field goals, they would have a chance. Now, obviously, Seattle only made 2 trips to the red zone, so it wasn't the greatest prediction, but they were able to hold Seattle to field goals. And while we're at it, shout out to Jason Myers for knocking down those field goals, because obviously every point was key. And I'm sure there's a lot of fantasy managers out there that if you started Jason Myers, you're probably giving him a game ball this week. Geno obviously had another good game. They were able to get both DK and Tyler Lockett involved. This was a great bounce back game for DK, who made a bunch of big plays down the stretch and was able to put them in position to win the game in regulation. So another good win for Seattle, and they're able to maintain pace with the San Francisco 49ers in their division. I believe they play them this week. If they don't play them this week, they play the 49ers soon. So we'll definitely have a definitive first place. We'll have a definitive division leader. That's what I'm trying to say. Definitive division leader after they play. So on the Commander side, Sam Howell continues to show why he deserves to be the future of their team. Brian Robinson had a nice game in the receiving aspect. Had a couple of nice long receptions along with Antonio Gibson. Sam did a good job of finding both of them in space and making plays. Again, this is a little bit like Seattle, where the defenses were pretty good for the most of the game. They didn't fail too much, but there were obviously a few plays here and there that I'm sure they would like back. Also, in this situation, obviously, Ron Rivera is another person that's on hot seat watch here, but it's very likely that he could be moved to the front of the firing odds, especially if they lose to the Giants next week. Honestly, if they lose that game, I would be very surprised if Ron Rivera is even allowed into the locker room, especially considering the fact that they'll be at home for this one. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if they lose that game. I don't expect them to. As a Giants fan, obviously seeing what the Giants have looked like, especially since Daniel Jones has gone down. So that should be a game that the Commanders win. But if they lose, I would be very surprised if Ron Rivera is still employed as the head coach of the Washington Commanders after that game. So the next game, we'll move on to the Falcons and the Cardinals. First of all, I want to congratulate the Cardinals on a great win. Kyler Murray looked very, very good out there. He was running, and with the way he was running, it almost made you almost would have forgot that he tore his ACL practically about a year ago, because he was out there making plays, especially on the 3rd down and 10 that basically swung the momentum back to their side as they were on the final drive. Trey McBride had a great game. It's good to see the second-year tight end having that kind of game, especially with the late catch. James Conner also having a good game, doing a good job of making sure he did not score, which was very, very important, because that basically allowed them to run the clock all the way down and allow Matt Prater to win the game for them. For the Atlanta side, they finally gave Bijan Robinson the majority of the touches. This was a tough game for them through the air between both Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder, who came in relief once Heineke was hurt. So this is another situation where I'm not sure how to read this, honestly, because this game honestly was going to be before the Commanders, because I thought that Arthur Smith would have had higher odds to be fired sooner than Ron Rivera. But then a report from The Athletic came out today saying that basically Arthur Smith is expected to be back next season unless he just completely loses the locker room. So it'll be interesting to see what this final stretch looks like. And just like with Brandon Staley and his defense, I think with Arthur Smith being an offensive-minded guy, if it's a situation where he continues to underutilize guys or their offense just doesn't look in sync, unless it's a situation where the owner's just like, okay, we're just going to try to find you another quarterback, because I think everybody understands that Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ritter are probably not the guys to go forward with. Then it's a situation at that point where you just try to find another guy and see if it's the coach in the system or if it's the quarterback themselves. So so my next section was titled Clutch Comebacks. So the first game was Browns versus Ravens. Cleveland did a good job running the football. Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt both had. Well, Jerome Ford had a good rushing game. Kareem Hunt had a touchdown at one point. So for this one, honestly, I think credit obviously has to go to the defense because they were able to get a pick six and they were able to turn Lamar Jackson over twice. So very impressive on their part, especially being able to shut down Baltimore basically after Odell had that 40-yard touchdown to make it 24-9. Offensively, in addition to the run game, Deshaun Watson did a very good job of getting the ball out of his hands quickly and allowing his playmakers to make plays. So while his numbers weren't too gaudy from a statistical standpoint, he played the QB position probably as well as he's done in a while. And that proved key as they were able to obviously come back and win. On the Baltimore side, they didn't run the ball as effectively as I thought they would, especially when you have that big of a lead. I think if Lamar could have one play back, it obviously would have been the pick six, even though the ball was tipped. So that partially, well, not partially. I would say that mostly absolves Lamar in my mind because if a pass is tipped, there's not too much you can do as a quarterback at that point. So it's obviously a tough loss for them because you wish that you would be able to continue to build separation between you and your other division mates. Of course, the Browns won. Steelers found a way to beat the Packers, and then the Bengals were unable to win, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, that's a tough loss for Baltimore, but I wouldn't be too worried because I don't think there's going to be that many games where they're unable to run the football and Lamar has two turnovers and a whole bunch of other things. Surprisingly, do want to bring this up that we had two defensive touchdowns in this game. We had obviously the pick six from Kyle Hamilton to start the game, and then we had the pick six from Cleveland which would have tied the game, but the kicker missed the extra point. So I don't know. I don't remember the last time we've had two defensive touchdowns in a game, but it was cool to see that we were able to see scores from both sides. And the other game from this category, as we just brought up, the Texans and the Bengals. So this was starting to look like it was going to be a clutch comeback for the Bengals, as they were down 27-17, I want to say, with about 5 minutes left. And then there was a situation where C.J. Stroud finally made one of those rookie mistakes where I don't know if I would say maybe it was a situation where he threw the ball late. I didn't watch the replay, so I'd have to check again. But he threw an interception up 10. Starting to, that's one of those where you might just want to either take the sack or just kind of try to look to run and trust your defense there. But that allowed Cincinnati to kind of get some momentum going, score a touchdown, and keep the game relatively close, and then go ahead and tie the game once they got the ball back. But C.J. Stroud rebounded very, very, very quickly and very effectively, obviously taking his team down the field for the game-winning drive in regulation. So even with that rookie mistake, it's been very impressive to see what CJ Stroud has done this year. For a guy to only throw 2 interceptions as a rookie, up to this point, has been very impressive. And just for comparison, I think most people say from a statistical standpoint that Justin Herbert has had the best rookie season as a quarterback. And for him, he had a 67% completion percentage, 4,336 yards, 31 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, with an additional 234 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. With the pace that CJ is on, he is probably bound to beat that. And that's what makes it even all the more impressive when you have to, and you almost have to remind yourself that this guy is a rookie that got picked second in the NFL draft. Also, I understand what Dan Campbell is doing in Detroit right now, but Demarco Ryans has my vote for Coach of the Year right now, considering where Houston was last year. Because you could argue that even though Detroit has been very impressive this year, they were 8-9 last year, if I'm not mistaken. So going from 8-9 to this is obviously impressive. Going from 8-9 to 7-2, if I'm not mistaken, is impressive. But Houston was basically, I guess for comparison purposes, I would say Houston is where the Panthers and potentially the Giants are sitting right now, where it was tough to watch. It was a situation where you didn't expect them to win more than 1 or 2 games the season before. So to see Demarco year one just take them out of that rut and give them a position and put them in a position to be a playoff team, because this game against the Bengals will probably have very big implications for the playoffs, since the Texans do have that tiebreaker now, head-to-head tiebreaker, in the event that the Bengals or the Texans don't catch their division division rivals and win their division. Also, Houston did a very good job on the ground for this game, and it was just a situation where you just, from both sides, both quarterbacks, both did a good job of improvising at times, making things happen, making plays when there seemed to be nothing there. So it's an impressive game from both teams. If you're Cincinnati, you're probably, especially if you're Tyler Boyd, you're probably you may still be disappointed about the drop touchdown, the bobbled drop in the end zone that preceded the game-winning drive from CJ Stroud and the Texans. But it was overall a very good game. Definitely a game that lived up to the hype, and I wouldn't be upset if we got to see that one in the playoffs. Now that would probably require the Texans to win the division over Jacksonville, which seems a little bit like a long shot still, even though the Jaguars did lose to the 49ers this week. But we will see. We'll definitely see. And it was good to see CJ Stroud have another good week and overcome those 3 turnovers that were accounted to him. For our final theme and final game, this final theme was the underrated game of the week. And for the second week in a row, we have the Vikings as they played against the Saints this week. Joshua Dobbs has looked good for the last couple weeks, and I know I said, I think a couple weeks ago, that you weren't winning in Arizona with Joshua Dobbs, but when Kyler Murray came back, they would probably have a better chance of winning games and closing. I think part of that, honestly, was that you had more faith in Kyler to make things happen with the level of talent around him. Because we see now, obviously, in Minnesota that Joshua's had. I think, obviously, if you looked at Minnesota's offense and you look at Arizona's offense, you would say that Minnesota, even without Justin Jefferson, is the more talented offense. So putting Joshua Dobbs around guys who are weapons and are proven. Even Jordan Addison, who is a rookie right now. You see the level of play that he can have. Now, I still wouldn't say that he would be QB1, so to speak, but he can put together impressive performances when he has a good amount of talent around him. It was good to see him improvising, making plays that were out of nowhere for sure. And I think obviously having the rushing element is huge. I think that honestly is the biggest thing that he has unlocked in the Vikings offense, because now Kevin O'Connell can run read options, RPOs, and other things that you probably wouldn't have been able to run with Kurt, because he obviously doesn't have the rushing threat that Joshua Dobbs does. So being able to unlock that for this Vikings offense is exciting. And hopefully when Justin Jefferson gets back, Joshua Dobbs can continue to put together these great performances that he's been doing the last couple of weeks. On the Saints side, obviously Derek Carr got hurt, suffered of a concussion. Hopefully he will be good to go after the bye week. But Jameis Winston came in and had a nice start. He did throw 2 picks, but to me, I only fault him for one of them. The first one he threw, Alvin Kamara I believe Alvin Kamara was supposed to be scanning the defense to figure out who to pick up defensively. So I don't know if it was a missed adjustment in terms of making a call at the line, and that's why he missed, and that's why he was unable to pick up the linebacker. But the linebacker basically came free, and Jameis was just trying to make sure he got the pass off. On the second one, it was a serious overthrow, and that's one of those that you probably, I think even Jameis wishes he would have back, because I think he still probably would have made that throw, but I don't know if he overthrows. I don't know if he makes that overthrow. So for the Saints, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Derek Carr, health wise. But obviously, if he's okay, he'll be starting week 12. It's not a situation where he's going to lose his job or anything like that. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. Also, you hope that if you're a Saints fan, you hope that you're able to hold on to this division lead, because just like the Texans and the Bengals game, this game could have serious implications for the wild card in the playoffs. And now the Vikings obviously have that tiebreaker. So interested to see what happens with this NFC South race as we continue, because that's also part of the thing that's intriguing with, say, the Falcons. Because if the Falcons go on a run and they win the division, then obviously not only is Arthur Smith off the hot seat, but then at that point the question is, how do they go about acquiring a different quarterback if they feel that they need to acquire a different quarterback, which I feel like they probably do in the front office and behind the scenes, but obviously not going to be expressed out front. So that was the Week 10 recap. If there were any games that you would have liked me to talk about, just let me know in the comments, and we can, I can potentially talk about them right before we get into the Week 11 preview. I appreciate everybody who took the time to listen to this whole thing. And again, just ask that you like, comment, subscribe, and share. And this has been another episode of Brian's Deductions. We will see you later in the week, hopefully, for the Week 11 NFL preview. And stay tuned for the next play.